Soviet Union, 1941, the first nation in the human history that is under the rule of the communists. Rise under the ashes of Russian Empire during the end of World War I, the young Union had overcome many challenges, from the remnants of the Russian Empire loyalists to the fierce attack of the Entente intervention forces. From the Polish-Soviet War to the economic blockade of the Western, the Union is able to remain persistent in the past 20 years. Under the leadership of the Union's second leader, Joseph Stalin, thousands of factory chimney has risen from the ground on what used to be farmland. The Three 5 Years Plan had transformed Union from an agricultural nation into one of the world's largest industrial power. The Red Army has been built into one of the biggest violent machines that mankind have ever witnessed. The expansion into the Baltic and Poland in the past 2 years had secured the safety of its major city and sought huge political benefit to the Union in the world stage. Thousands, if not millions, people across the world from China, Great Britain, America, and many more have been inspired by the success of the first communist regime in the world and turned into communist supporters themselves. It seems like the weak Western nation that have merely recovered from the Great Depression will need to witness a communist takeover of the world. There will always be shadow if light exists. The great success of the Union wouldn't come to reality without a great cost. The rapid industrialization and failed effort to nationalize farmland have caused a massive famine in Ukraine. Between the year 1932 and 1933, more than 1 million Ukrainian civilians have died during the famine. The conquest of Poland and Baltic states have left numerous cases of Soviet government committing genocide to local population that has been accused to be capitalist sympathizers. In the center of the Union, its capital Moscow, a series of trials have occurred since 1936 regarding cases about military high commanders and political figures being disloyal towards the Union. The series of trials are named as the Great Purge, and although Joseph Stalin had used the purge as a tool to solidify its control over the nation, it have also devastated the nation. More than 80% of Red Army high commanders has been killed throughout the Great Purge. Most of them are veterans that have survived the Russian Civil War. For replacement, many newly recruited soldiers that have no experience with commanding a division during wartime has been put into the military high command. The Red Army is nowhere close to an actual combat army beside its size of 4.8 million soldiers. Meanwhile, Western Europe, 1941, the flag of swastika victoriously fly upon the tip of Eiffel Tower. The German Reich, under the lead of Adolf Hitler, seems to be unstoppable. With the application of Blitzkrieg, a military tactic that seeks to defeat the enemy within a short period of time through breaking over their defense line and encircle their division with tanks. They have allowed them to capture the capital of France, Paris, within 2 months, a city where the German Empire was never able to capture during the 4 years long Great War just 20 years ago. The British Empire by 1941 is the sole nation in Europe that is fighting against the German Reich. Despite the failed attempt to defeat the British Air Force during the Battle of Britain, the German Reich seems to be at its all-time peak. However, like what it's been previously mentioned, there are also shadows that the German Reich is facing at 1941, which is its economy. In 1933, Adolf Hitler rose to power in Germany under the promise to reverse the economic downturn caused by the Great Depression and the unemployment rates of more than 20%. In order to decrease the unemployment rate, Germany has started a series of public programs to improve the German infrastructure, or so-called the Autobahn. Hitler had also heavily invested in military industry, and through creating new demand for jobs out of these two projects, the German unemployment rate has been pushed into minimum. The question arises from here, where does the money for these nationwide projects come from? At the beginning, the German government borrowed loans from Western nations such as the Great Britain and France. Eventually, the German government was no longer able to borrow any more money from the West. In order to prevent this bubble of economic prosperity to explode, they then had to release the Mifo bill that functioned like a Ponzi scheme. The German government had promised its people that the Mifo bill is an investment plan with a high interest rate guaranteed. They then used the money from the new investors to pay off the old one, with part of the money going towards the public projects. By 1938, the Mifo bill system is no longer able to sustain as there are no longer enough Germans that can invest into the program. With no other solutions, the Nazi Party came out with a final plan to address this upcoming economic crisis, war. By robbing other countries' resources and people, the Nazi Party will be able to receive enough money to continue support a lavish living style in German mainland and its economic miracle. First, it's the Austrians, then it's the Czechoslovakians, after that it's the Polish, followed with the French. By 1941, with no one left to rob beside Great Britain and the Soviet Union, Hitler drew his eyes to the east. The German has planned out the invasion of Soviet Union in 3 different fronts, with the invasion being launched on June 22, 1941. In the north, the Army Group North, under the leadership of Marshal Lee, will be in charge of taking over the Baltic states and Leningrad with the help of the Finnish. The goal of the Army Group North will be to cut off the Soviet access to the Baltic Sea. The Army Group South, under the lead of Marshal Rundstedt, will be in charge of taking over Ukraine, one of the most populated and industrialized regions of the Union. By taking over Ukraine, the ability that Soviet Union have on military production will be significantly damaged. Finally, it's the Army Group Center under the lead of Marshal Bock. Their job will be securing the flank of the North and the South by supporting both Army Groups to encircle and neutralize the Red Army divisions. The final objective will be to capture Moscow, the political and railway center of the Union. In theory, by the end of 1941, the Wehrmacht will be able to push the Red Army behind the line of Archangelsk, Astrakhan, or so-called the AA line. By that time, Soviet Union, that had lost the majority of its industry and population, will be either too weak to threaten the German Reich's dominance over the East, or simply collapse into warlord state. This plan of the invasion of Soviet Union has been so-called the Operation Barbarossa, and the German Wehrmacht anticipated that under the fierce attack of the German army, the weak Red Army that had barely recovered from the Great Purge won't last for over 6 months. It is 4 a.m. of June 22, 1941 in Soviet Union. Workers from Leningrad factories are still sleeping, dreaming about ways to enjoy their Sunday break. Ludmila is studying for history in Kiev University, trying to complete her degree on this course. Great War veterans in Stalingrad are sharing with their grandchild about their life in the early 20s. Guided by the rising sun from the east, the German Luftwaffe fly towards the major airbase and cities of the Union. Their goal is to fully destroy the Soviet Air Force before the operation on the land starts, followed by the first bomb dropped from the plane. The Great Patriotic War has begun.